Sacred silence after awakening. Why losing motivation isn't the end, it's the beginning. Welcome to Soul of Life, a quiet corner of YouTube where we dive beneath the noise, beneath the surface, and listen for the truths that can't be shouted, only whispered. Today's journey begins in a strange and silent place, somewhere along your path of growth, perhaps after a powerful realization or the slow collapse of an identity you once clung to. Something inside you stopped, not in despair, not in panic, but in a stillness so deep it felt sacred. You looked around and wondered, why does everything feel hollow now that I finally see clearly? You thought awakening would bring fire. Instead, it brought fog. You expected purpose, but found pause. The things that once lit you up now feel foreign. This isn't failure, and you are not lost. What you're experiencing has a name. Carl Jung called it the liminal space, the mysterious. Sacred pause between the death of who you were and the birth of who you're becoming. And that's where we begin. 1. The collapse of the false fuel. Let's not sugarcoat it. Most of your life, your motivation wasn't pure. It was borrowed, conditioned. It came from outside, from people clapping, timelines ticking, bosses watching. You moved not because your soul whispered yes, but because the world screamed keep going. You wore ambition like armor. You called it purpose, but deep down, it was survival. You weren't chasing dreams. You were chasing validation dressed up as dreams. And for a while, it worked. You hit the marks, got the praise, checked the boxes. But something felt off. You smiled on the outside and starved on the inside. Then came the awakening. Suddenly, the things that once drove you didn't. The job, the goals, the image, all of it started to fall apart. Not with a crash, but with a quiet, aching indifference. You didn't burn out. You woke up, and like a caterpillar in the cocoon, you began to dissolve. Not into chaos, but into something deeper. Unformed, honest, real. It feels like you've lost your fire. But what you've really lost is the lie that used to light it. And that is the beginning of truth. 2. Stillness is not emptiness. When the false fuel runs out, silence takes its place. At first, it feels like relief. No more pretending. No more performing. You step off the treadmill. You breathe. But then, the silence grows louder. Not in noise, but in presence. It sits with you, follows you, stares back at you in the mirror. And here's the hard truth. You don't know who you are without the chase. You're no longer running, but you're not arriving anywhere either. You tell yourself you should be doing more, but every push feels fake. Every goal feels like someone else's dream. You're not lazy, you're listening, and what you're hearing is nothing. A kind of stillness that both soothes and scares you. But this stillness, it's not emptiness, it's not failure, it's space. Space for something real to emerge. Space for the soul to speak. And the soul never shouts. It waits. Not for applause, not for urgency, but for honesty. This is where most people panic. They run back to the noise, back to the old goals, back to the comfort of motion. But not you. Because something inside knows stillness is not the end. It's the doorway. You are not falling behind. You are falling inward, and that takes courage. 3. The ego isn't gone, it's dazed. Here's the part most people misunderstand. Your ego didn't die. It just lost the map. For years, it followed a script. Be successful, be liked, be useful, be more. It knew its lines, it played its part, but after awakening, that script burns. Suddenly, the roles stop making sense. The mask feels too tight. The lines sound fake in your mouth. And the ego, poor thing, is left confused. It's like a stage actor whose show got canceled mid-performance, still standing in costume, still waiting for applause. But the theater is empty now. This is why you feel disoriented. Not broken, not dysfunctional, just unanchored. You're between stories. The old one collapsed, the new one hasn't started yet. And in that gap, there's no script to follow, only silence. And the ego hates silence. It craves structure, identity, direction. Without those things, it panics. It tells you something's wrong, but it's not wrong. It's real. Carl Jung called this the beginning of individuation, the moment the ego steps down and the true self begins to rise. But it doesn't happen all at once. There's no lightning bolt, no grand speech, just a quiet shift, a hum beneath the noise, a sense that maybe, just maybe, you're becoming someone you haven't met yet. And that someone doesn't need a mask, doesn't need to perform, doesn't chase validation, they just are. And your only job now, to make space for that self to take the lead, even if the ego trembles, even if the world doesn't understand, even if nothing makes sense yet, because one day soon, it will. Fingwer, the death before the rebirth. Something in you has already died, but there was no funeral, no goodbye, no closure, just silence and the slow fading of old desires. You didn't wake up one morning and decide to change. Change came for you, quietly, uninvited, like a tide pulling you away from everything familiar. And it took things, the drive, the hunger, the fire that once kept you moving. At first, you called it burnout. Then, maybe depression. But deep down, you knew this was something else. It wasn't collapse. It was shedding. You were outgrowing the skin you once called you. Carl Jung spoke of this as a sacred death. The moment the ego begins to dissolve, and the self has not yet taken its place. It's a strange limbo. You're no longer who you were, but not yet who you're becoming. You drift, you doubt, you ache, and still, you wait. This death isn't loud. It doesn't scream. It sighs. It lets go of everything that once held you together. Titles, labels, stories, roles. And it asks you to walk naked into the unknown. No certainty, no plan, just trust. Most people run from this place, back to old habits, old distractions, old versions of themselves. But not you, because even in the fog, you feel something deeper rising, something formless but honest, raw, real, quietly alive. This is the cocoon, not the end, not the beginning, but the in-between, where the caterpillar dissolves, not because it failed, but because flight requires surrender. So let it die. The fake goals, the forced ambition, the version of you built to impress. Let it all burn, because what rises from those ashes will finally be true. 5. The world will not understand. Let's be honest, this part of the journey, it's invisible to most people. They don't see your unraveling as sacred. They see it as a problem to fix. You tell them you've lost motivation, and they suggest more goals. You say you feel empty. They say take a trip, buy something, get out more. They mean well, but they don't get it. Because this isn't about being sad. It's about no longer being satisfied with pretending. You're not avoiding life. You're questioning the version of life you were sold. And that makes people uncomfortable. Because if you stop playing the game, they're forced to wonder why they're still playing. So they'll call you lost, unfocused, lazy, wasting your potential. But what they call drifting, Jung called initiation. This isn't regression, it's evolution. You're not falling apart, you're falling inward. And the culture doesn't have a name for that, because our world worships performance, movement, progress, applause. It doesn't know what to do with stillness. It fears the quiet. It fears people who step off the treadmill and start asking real questions. So here's your task. Don't expect them to understand. This is your path, your silence, your becoming. It doesn't need to be validated to be real. The truth is, you're not behind. You're ahead of the noise. And that can feel lonely, but solitude isn't the same as isolation. Sometimes, it's the space where the soul gets heard. So when the world stares in confusion, when no one claps, when no one sees what's happening inside you, remember this: the real transformation always happens in the dark, in the quiet, far from the spotlight. 6. The birth of a new impulse. And then, almost without warning, something shifts. Not a lightning bolt, not a grand breakthrough, just a quiet nudge, a feeling. It doesn't scream, it hums. You wake up one morning and for the first time in a long while, you don't feel like forcing anything. But you do feel like moving. Not to impress, not to catch up, but to express something real inside you. That's the new fuel. It's not pressure, it's resonance. It doesn't come from your to-do list, it comes from your center. This new impulse isn't a plan, it's a pulse. It asks nothing of you, except your honesty. Maybe you pick up a pen again. Maybe you call someone just to listen. Maybe you take a walk without needing to track the steps. It doesn't look like hustle. It looks like presence. You start doing things not because you have to, but because not doing them would feel like betrayal. Jung called this the emergence of the self. Not a perfect self, but a true one. One that doesn't chase applause. One that doesn't need approval. This self doesn't bark orders, it whispers. And when you finally stop trying to figure it out, you begin to feel it out. Not what the world wants, not what your ego wants, but what life wants to do through you. It's subtle, but it's alive. And that quiet yes you feel in your chest, that's your real compass. Follow it, even if it leads you off the beaten path, because that path might finally be yours. 7. Living symbolically. Something changes when the self begins to lead. You stop chasing, you start listening, you stop asking, what should I do, and start asking, what feels honest right now. The world taught you to strategize, but now you're learning to sense. Your life becomes quieter, but deeper. You notice small things. A line in a book that echoes a buried truth. A stranger's smile that stirs something ancient. A moment of stillness that feels like home. This is not fantasy. This is symbolic living. You begin to see life as a conversation, not a test, not a race. A dialogue between your soul and the world. Jung called this the symbolic life. A life not ruled by logic or routine, but by meaning. You stop performing, you start participating, you stop trying to dominate your path, you walk it, barefoot, eyes open, heart soft. The signs don't come as lightning, they come as nudges, as dreams, as gut feelings, and you trust them, not because they're rational, but because they ring true. You no longer need to be impressive, you just need to be in tune. That's how real movement happens now, not by pushing harder, but by aligning deeper. And strangely, you still get things done, but from a place of peace, not pressure. This is your new rhythm. No more sprinting to prove, only walking to seal. And when you live like this, everything becomes alive again, even the ordinary things. Because the sacred is no longer out there, it's in here, in you, in how you choose to show up now. This is not the end, it's the return. So if you felt lost lately, if your fire dimmed, if your ambitions dissolved into fog, know this: you are not broken, you are becoming. You're not falling behind, you're falling into truth, into rhythm, into something that can't be measured, only lived. The emptiness you feel, it's not the end of your path. It's the clearing of space for something real to take root. Let others chase clarity, let them race toward goals. You are learning to move differently, to listen deeply, to follow the quiet pull of something honest. This is what it means to live with soul, not to perform life, but to feel it, to embody it, to walk with it. And if anything in this message stirred something in you, a memory, a question, a soft ache you haven't named yet, then this space was made for you. Here on Soul of Life, we don't rush the healing, we don't force the becoming, we simply remember together. So if you feel called, leave a comment, not for attention, but as a whisper into the dark, a reminder that someone else out there is walking too. And if this video helped, share it with someone quietly unraveling. Someone sitting in their own stillness, wondering if it means something, because it does. And until we meet again, trust the pause, trust the quiet. That's where your real life begins.